Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of the Heroes, Villains, and Sidekick Show. On today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at a villain. I just realized it's been a while since I've talked about a villain, so we're going to be looking at a villain and this is actually from a cartoon. I guess it could be from comics as well, but he originally did star in a cartoon in the 60s. We are going to be looking today at Dr. Zinn, arch nemesis of Jonny Quest and his dad, Benton Quest, on the cartoon Jonny Quest. And that's what we do here on the Heroes, Villains, and Sidekick Show. We look at the origins and backstories of popular and obscure characters throughout the comic book and pop culture universe. And today's, it's a little bit off the comic path. Of course, we're going to get back to comics with Dr. Zinn a little bit later on in the podcast, but I think I should probably talk a little bit about the Jonny Quest show in general, just in case there's people who haven't seen it or you need a little bit of a refresher. It will help to round out Zinn's character. Dr. Zinn is the arch nemesis of Dr. Benton Quest on the animated cartoon Jonny Quest that first aired on September 18th, 1964. Now, Jonny Quest actually aired in primetime. We don't think of these things like, primetime TV. Jonny Quest was on in 1964, and it was a huge success, both because of its just incredible and sort of different-looking art for the time and storytelling. Oddly enough, well, I guess other shows, this is the same fate. It only lasted one season. But, like a lot of sci-fi shows of that time, even like Star Trek, there was only, three seasons. It gained most of its popularity, notoriety, and money in syndication. Now, the show was produced by Hanna-Barbera, which is amazing shows of our childhood, for Screen Gems, and was created and designed by comic book artist Doug Wildey. And I remember just loving this show. I watched it in syndication, and like a lot of shows that you've only ever seen in syndication, I thought there were a lot more seasons than just one. I was really surprised to find out that it ended so soon. So Jonny Quest, or The Adventures of Jonny Quest, was an animated sci-fi series that, to simply put it, was about a boy, his friend, and his dog Bandit, and they would accompany their father on very cool scientific adventures against all kinds of baddies. Now, the show's main protagonists were Jonny Quest, an 11-year-old boy whose mother had died when he was young, and he was schooled by his father and his father's associates in all kinds of fun stuff that kids should learn, like judo, firearms, and scuba diving. He didn't really like the whole school thing, so his dad sort of tailored his education. And speaking of his dad, his father was Dr. Benton Quest. Now again, that's Jonny's dad, and he is a scientific genius who works for the government and tries to do, the best job a single dad can do, figuring that people are always trying to kill them in every episode. Now, to help him out, the government has put Roger Race Bannon in their employ as a bodyguard. Now, Race is just an awesome character, and he really always reminded me of Steve from Queen. Now, Haji is Jonny's best friend. He's about the same age, and he was kind of adopted by the Quests, and he's more of a thinker than Jonny, but he's also well-versed in judo and all the activities Jonny excels in, but he also has some mystical ability. And to round out the cast, there is Bandit, who is a dog. It's their dog. It's a little bulldog, and the neat thing about Bandit is really unlike a lot of the other characters in Hanna-Barbera cartoons like Scooby-Doo and I'm blanking on Hung Kong Phooey, those types of animals that were dogs but were very human-like. This is a real dog. Of course, it seems to be a really smart dog. It has facial expressions. It's a really interesting mix of sort of humanizing the animal and also still letting it be an animal. Now, the Quest's base of operations was their futuristic compound in the Florida Keys, but of course they're rarely there as they're racing around the globe solving scientific mysteries that threaten the very existence of our planet. Now, the Quest faced a lot of cool villains and plots of world domination and destruction, but there was really only one villain that appeared in more than one episode, and you probably guessed it already because it is the title of the podcast. That villain was Dr. Zinn, and on more than one occasion tries to take over the world through various evil schemes and, things he creates. Again, he is a genius, an evil genius. He is on the same level as Benton Quest, Jonny's dad, as far as intelligence goes. And as Dr. Quest announces in Zinn's first episode, they are arch rivals. The only problem with the character is, unfortunately, the era he was created in. Dr. Zinn is Asian, and he fits into a category of a yellow peril villain that was common in the Cold War era. You can see this a lot of villains in that era, and, let's be honest, it's pretty gross and racist, but at the same time, we do kind of see these things happening today, stereotyping different types of peoples as villains or good guys, but back then, this was very prevalent. I'll put some images up that are, at the time were seen as totally fine, but were definitely trying to, really bring out that xenophobia and that racism that was out there. Zinn first appeared on The Adventures of Jonny Quest in Episode 5 titled Rise of the Gold, which aired in 1964. Now in this episode, the Quests discover a plan that Zinn is masterminded to destroy the world's economy via the introduction of very, very realistic fake gold, sort of via scientific alchemy. So these are some pretty deep plots here. World domination through economic means. Usually, someone's building a death ray. Don't get me wrong, he's built death rays before, but this was really introducing him as this high-level villain. His most famous or remembered episode was that of the robot spy, and not so much for him, because he's not in these a lot. He's never doing the fighting, but it was for the robots he created. These were those cool spider-like robots with the the spider legs and the one red eye in the middle. They're really cool, and I put images up on the episodes page, so check them out. I put tons of images, some videos. The art in this show was so amazing. All I can do is just not to make it all photos. Now, this is an animated character, so unlike a comic book, we have a voice actor involved. So the character of Zinn was voiced by Victor Perrin. I hope I'm saying that right. And you more than likely have heard or even seen him in other sci-fi shows. Now, I love doing this kind of research on these characters, and a lot of this stuff about Victor Perrin was really fun to find out. Now, Victor Perrin was not only the voice of Zinn, but he did the introduction for the show The Outer Limits. Now, I love this show. Of course, I love Twilight Zone, but The Outer Limits is edgy. It's really sort of I love The Outer Limits. I did not know that Victor Perrin was the voice of Control. He did the intro to The Outer Limits. I actually posted it on the show's page. So I thought that was pretty cool. And now, if that wasn't cool enough, he voiced other characters. So he voiced characters in the original Star Trek series. For example, he was the voice of Metron in the episode Arena when Kirk fought the Gorn. So he's that sort of angelish looking type being, just the voice. And he was also the voice of the Nomad probe in the episode The Changeling, which is pretty cool, that Nomad, I am Nomad. So that was neat. And we did actually get to see him in Star Trek. He did get to appear in person in a very sort of memorable, very iconic episode of Star Trek, the one that was called Mirror Mirror, where the crew is transported to the evil universe. Spock's got a beard or a little goatee. Well, Victor, he plays the head of the Hulka state, head of state. So that guy who's, a peace-loving nation trying to work with the Enterprise, he is the head Hulka. So we actually did get to see him on screen. And I've got some photos, again, of Victor in Star Trek and some of the other roles he was in on the episodes page. So back to Zinn. Zinn and the Quest battle many times throughout all versions of the show. What I mean by that, there was, of course, the original series. Then, they do some reboots, the New Adventures of Jonny Quest, a Jonny Quest movie, and the Real Adventures of Jonny Quest. So there were quite a few out there where they would just keep reviving the character. But as always, no matter the plan, Zinn unfortunately came up short. But man, he built one really mean robot. One of the reasons why I wanted to highlight a Quest character from Jonny Quest, was because of the new comic book title out called Future Quest, which is written by Jeff Parker. It is just an amazing, and it's so fun to read, and I cannot recommend it enough. Now, it doesn't just have the Quest in it has everyone in it. Hanna-Barbera characters galore. Well, who's everyone? I'm talking Space Ghost, Zinn, the Impossibles, Frankenstein Jr., the Herculoids, Midor. I mean, there's just tons of them. More and more show up in each book. It's amazing. This is like childhood crack in 4 colors. Now, if you love those shows, buy this comic. And if you just like awesome comics with fun stories, buy this comic. It is so much fun. And now a quick word from our sponsor, Discount Comic Book Service, dcbservice.com. All books, minimum 40% off. You order them, they ship them to you. I have never had a book damaged or lost. Perfect condition. One of the sales going on right now that I definitely took advantage of this month was 50% off of all the young animal titles, sort of like Cave Carson and Shade, The Changing Girl, all those, 50% off each one of them. Great deals. Go check them out, dcbservice.com. And now for something a little different. I actually had the opportunity to work with Jeff Parker, the writer of Future Quest, on a project called Meteor Men a few years ago for Oni. And fun title, check it out. And I asked him if we could actually talk about the new series and I can have him on the podcast. I'm going to try to get maybe some more interviews into the show and, talk about the series and just totally geek out on Hanna-Barbera and Jonny Quest. He's a huge Jonny Quest fan. So it was a great talk, a fun talk, totally geeked out about Jonny Quest and Dr. Zinn and everything, and the comic itself. So I give you a conversation I had with the amazing Jeff Parker. Just take my money. That was the first thing I thought when I saw the late great Darwin Cook's teaser for Future Quest. Now, this comic is like Saturday morning, all wrapped up in 22 beautiful pages. What do we have? We have Space Ghost, Jonny Quest, The Impossibles, Birdman, Mitor, The Herculoids, my personal favorite, and Frankenstein Jr. all together in one DC book, their new line where they bring back and they use all of sort of Hanna-Barbera's action characters in one title. And if just the idea of having all these characters interacting in one book, Jonny Quest with Space Ghost and The Herculoids with Birdman, if that wasn't enough, the creators on the book just take it up to a whole nother level. Jeff Parker is the writer behind this huge undertaking, and weaving all these words together and these storylines and these universes, it is such a fun read. And Evan Doc Sharner, I'm probably saying his name wrong, I'm probably killing his name, but he is just making all of Jeff's characters and words and just everything come to life. It is just such a fun book to read. And I was lucky enough to interview Jeff and talk to him a little bit about Future Quest, and that's what we're going to listen to right now. So one of the coolest things about being able to talk to you tonight, Jeff, is that I never really get to talk to anyone that I worked with on projects. So as I've told some of the listeners, I do some coloring, and I got to work on a project with Jeff on a book called Meteor Men that he wrote and Sandy Jarrell created, and I never get to talk to anybody. So it's nice to say hello.
Yeah. It's weird, and now it's like, in retrospect, it's like, why weren't we Skyping then? But,
I know these long emails where we were going over things, and really all we had to do was Skype. I never even thought of it.
Yeah, well, the emails are good though, because then you have something you can refer back to. You can have a conversation with me, and I'll still bend it in my mind to whatever it is I wanted it to be. Oh, Kevin said he was going to do this and the other or whatever, and then it had nothing to do with what you said. The
selective memory, and especially when you're doing tasks like what Sandy would be drawing or coloring, I'd get stuff from you, I'd get patches from him, and it was nice to be able to organize the emails. But it is nice to say hello every once in a while.
Yeah.
But and anybody out there, if you haven't read Meteor Men, pick it up. It's amazing. It's on Amazon. It was an awesome project, and a crazy time because we finished it up just as I was moving.
Oh, that's right.
So my computer was the last thing I packed up when we were moving into the new house. So it was a crazy time.
Well, I'm glad we could make that more anxiety ridden for you by throwing that job.
I didn't need anything
else.
At
that time.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it.
We just lip serve.
Yeah. Sandy's like, oh yeah, no, we'll be done. We'll be done before you move. And I'm like, no, we won't. We're not gonna be done. Yeah. But it was fun. It was a great project. I had a blast. Doing it, and I loved.
Yeah. Well, Sandy had to stop and work on other projects in between. Like, some stuff with me on Batman 66 and things like that. And so, yeah, and Oni couldn't really complain because it's like he needs money. So, that's the way that went.
Yeah, I remember that's right. Batman 66, he was just starting to score. And I love that he's getting all the work now. And it's just, I love being able to pick up his books.
He's pretty busy these days.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I asked him about something the other day. He's like, all I do is draw. That's all I do is draw.
Yeah.
So that's great. I mean, he's just got some great stuff out there.
Yeah, he's already got the best record collection in the world from his old job, working at Nice Price Books. He's got every bit of vinyl he could possibly ever want. So he might as well just draw the rest of his life.
This is true. Well, and that's funny because that's how I met him. I had went in there when I lived down in North Carolina, and there was a stack of comics. And I picked them up, and I was looking through them, and there were all these old Aquamans, adventure comics, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna buy these. And someone came up and was like, oh, where did you just pick those up there? I'm like, yeah. He's like, oh, those are mine. I bought those. Those are mine. It was Sandy. So then so then we read comics for a little while and talked. The latest project, I know you're working on other things that I've been reading and just thoroughly digging, and it fits in with the character we talked about on the show today, is that you're working on Future Quest.
Yeah.
And now there are readers, like myself, men of a certain age. We know all the characters and what all these Hanna-Barbera properties and action and characters are about. But, for people who, maybe are a little younger or they slept in on Saturday mornings, there used to be cartoons on in the morning, kids, in case you didn't know. Can you just give a little overview of what the title's all about, maybe some of the characters in it?
Well, the anchor title really is Jonny Quest, which was Hanna-Barbera's big primetime action adventure cartoon. To paint the scene, I'd have to talk about, it was before my time too, because Flintstones came out, and that was a nighttime cartoon that was really a kind of a caveman take on a show called The Honeymooners.
Right.
And Jonny Quest was something that was right down the alley for anybody who was really into James Bond and stuff like that. But it was ostensibly a family adventure because there's no women in sight anywhere, but it was a dad, his son, the bodyguard, and then a kid from India that they adopted. And they went all over the world. They had all kinds of sci-fi things that they would get mixed up with, had mysteries. It was just a great show, and it had great music and great art by the legendary Doug Wildey, and Alex Toth worked on it.
Yeah.
And that pretty much influenced tons of stuff that they did after, and tons of movies and shows that you watched since. Later in the 60s, there was also a bunch of other more superhero-y cartoons with their own characters, like Space Ghost, who was this adventuring lone sentinel in outer space who just fought all kinds of monsters. There was the one I believe is your favorite, the Herculoids, which was pretty much composed of exactly okay, here's all kids want. All they want is a team of monsters. They don't even want to have to mess with. And they did have a family that kind of worked with them, but most of the time it's just the monsters on this planet, Amzot, and they're almost always fighting robots. You rarely see them fight something else. And you rarely even get a plot. It's robots show up, they start doing something. The Herculoids get mad as hell because they hate robots, and they just pound them to death.
Yeah.
The big rock ape Igu pounds them. Zoc, the laser space dragon, just
beams him. His eyes and his tail, right?
Tundro, the weirdo thing with a billion legs, shoots these gas bombs at it, and Gloop and Gleep, these what we call them polymorphs in our story.
Yeah.
These two blobs that can do all kinds of easy to animate things.
Right.
Like split into a dozen of themselves or combine into one big one, stretch around, do all kinds of things. Invariably, they're always forming a cushion for the human characters to follow.
That's true.
Or they'll slingshot some big boulder at something and smash it. Yeah. And then and there was one called Birdman, who is a superhero who looks exactly like you would expect, and he shoots solar radiation, and he works for secret agents. It just still kept coming back to that sort of James Bond vibe. And there was all this stuff, and it was really cool things. And we also have, let's see, who else do we have? We have the Impossibles, who were more of a kid's cartoon. They're more wacky, sort of a take on the Beatles. That's kind of funny because they sort of don't fit in with the rest of it. But our publisher, Dan DiDio, really liked the Impossibles, so we put them in there. And like Doc Shaner, the artist, he loved Dino Boy, which was a cartoon of all that group then too. And so we ended up putting Dino Boy in there, and Mytor, who was a caveman superhero. They were pretty simple with their mashups. It was like superhero plus prehistoric times.
Yeah. And
that's what you get. You get Mytor, who's surprisingly cool than you would think. And anyway, when DC wanted to tap into the Hanna-Barbera catalog because Warner Brothers owns it, they asked if we could do this one big kind of event to bring all these characters back in. And initially, they talked to Darwin Cook, and they decided to bring me and Shaner in to do it, which, I really was very happy about because it's like, oh, good. I know how they should be done because I'm that egotistical that I think only I can plan such a thing. And early on, I got to Darwin Cook, who, as we know, died last year.
Yeah.
He and I kind of brainstormed the initial thing. He had just some like scene ideas that he wanted to get in, and he told me that when he and I were in Baltimore at a show, and I went back and on the flight home, I wrote up a whole thing based on starting with what he had, and then fleshing it all out, and how these heroes from across a galaxy could all be in one story together. And then everybody liked it, and we went from there. So that's what Future Quest is. It's basically a combination of Jonny Quest and Space Ghost and all these other vaguely related heroes.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the cool things and what I really love about Future Quest is I loved all those shows, even the Impossibles. I just thought those were crazy, like the Spring guy and everything. But that's what I dig about Future Quest is that, it could be let's introduce a different character every month. Let's introduce a different group because we're gonna think that's awesome. Like, oh my God, there's Space Ghost with Jonny Quest. Oh my God, there's the Herculoids with Mytor. But when everybody's coming into it, even though you're saying, oh, Doc wanted to draw dinosaurs, so he did that. The introduction to people really move the plot along, really makes sense in the story. And these are, I know, I think so, and I think other people do in what I've been reading. And these are different universes. These things all didn't happen in Hanna-Barbera at the same time. So, you came back on the plane. Now, this is huge. And again, you said you had the ego to think you could do it. What do you start with? Because I'm interested in process. Like, what do you start with to say, how do I make all these disparate universes and characters work together?
Well, I knew it had to be a big, big threat. And I knew it had to be a big singular threat because we had a zillion characters teaming up together here. So you couldn't have them, and they're against the League of blah, blah, blah. That would just be too much for any artist to deal with. Right. And needed it. And that's how I started getting it. And also, one of the things they said pretty clearly on was, we were looking to Darwin Cook did a series called New Frontier back in the early aughts. Oh, yeah. That kind of did a classic take on the DC superheroes. It's my favorite thing DC's ever done, maybe. And it's like, okay, that's actually a really good framework for something like this. And, in that they had this kind of living island, this ancient sort of vaguely Cthulhu-esque, but it's made out of lots of little monsters and stuff like that. And I was thinking in terms of something like that, but something that was going from planet to planet. And I didn't want it to be it's just going there and it's killing everybody, even though that's ultimately the effect. I wanted it to be something that it kind of gloms onto all the living things of the world to grow itself. It brings you into it until it's pretty much blighted your planet by it. And then it can sacrifice a bunch of its mass to create a vortex through time and space to move to another planet. And I wanted it tied up with the origin of Space Ghost. I felt like we can't just have Space Ghost and not explain what he is, even though, you've only had like little attempts at that before.
Yeah, like Space Cop or something.
Yeah, and I thought, well, I just kind of engineered backwards from the fact that all you know of them is here's Space Ghost with his white ghost-like uniform. Here's Jan and Jace, who seem to wear something that's a little more like a straight uniform.
Yeah.
And they have Space Ghost symbol on it, like we report to this guy on the
right.
chest. And then I thought, well, okay, what if there was a whole force that he was part of? It's essentially the Lone Ranger's story.
Yeah.
If you think about it. In a way, it's kind of a big mashup of the Green Lanterns and Lone Ranger, filtered through Hanna-Barbera. But it's like, there were a whole bunch of these guys, and they all got killed trying to fight the this world wrecker.
Yeah.
And Space Ghost, it manages to put it down, but he's kind of like, once it finally comes back, and we explain that in the series, he has to try to round up powerful creatures and people like the Herculoids to help him.
Yeah.
And it makes a big break, and it gets to Earth and starts wreaking all sorts of havoc over here. And that's kind of where I was going with the whole thing. It was like, okay, this thing will get so big, but it'll sacrifice a bunch of its mass again to create the energy to get all the way across the galaxy to Earth. Space Ghost, you keep seeing him literally as a ghost at the beginning of the story because he's really trapped outside time and space trying to fight the thing and keep it from reaching our world.
Right.
And at first, Johnny and Haji see him and they think he's the threat, and he fades out. He's not even really tangible in the place with them at the time. So that's where I was kind of going with it. I thought it was neat to and I purposely give you Space Ghost mostly in flashback and until the end, because Space Ghost is kind of the rock star of the thing. I feel like you save him toward the last act, so that's when he's going to show up.
Yeah, he's like Darth Vader at the end of Rogue One.
Exactly.
Boom, he comes in. Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was a really interesting thing about the big baddie is that he, how does he move on to these other places? He makes these vortexes out of himself. So it's like, it's part Borg, part, like that amoeba creature in the old Star Trek thing that sort of they take over worlds and then they just go off to other ones to destroy them. It seemed like it was the perfect big baddie that you could span dimensions and universes with.
Yeah. And the thing kind of learns your language as it absorbs people. So, it has a hard time focusing because it's got a one core sort of brain. It's more by instinct, but then it's got all these minds inside of it until they get completely assimilated. So it's sort of like this big schizophrenic attacking your planet.
Well, and I was thinking when I first, in some of the later issues, I was thinking to myself, and of course, this is nothing you have to talk about, but I was thinking will we see, was this thing one thing? Was it one person? Was it one something? And it's become this. And, who is that person or who is that thing? So there's a little bit of that, I think, that's cool going on in the story. At least for me. I don't know if anyone else has been thinking that.
We allude to something like that a little bit in issue 11.
Okay. So, I'm a tad behind, but so that'll be.
Oh yeah, we're not near 11 yet in print. So don't worry.
I was going to say that sounded.
You'll live long for this conversation.
That sounded way far ahead when I was like, wait a second, I ordered my books, but I don't think I've got that one yet. That's fine. And the funny thing is, I'm looking up. I was just going to ask you. Now you mentioned that my favorite were the Herculoids, and I think because of that reason, because of the monsters, and I like the sounds that the amorphous figures made. Just that little weird squeaky look sound. And who was your, since I guess the quests are the core of the book, was that your favorite sort of group and character of that era?
Oh yeah, comics? I was absolutely the most into Jonny Quest. That's really influenced a lot of my work over the years. And like the graphic novel The Interman I did, it's all got heavy Quest influences. I love that stuff so much.
Yeah, well, I just remember it being so, I mean, even as a kid, being like, wow, the music and the art. And
really good music, yeah.
Yeah, the music was great. The characters and, that use of sort of limited animation where, to save money, it looked the way it looked, but it still was amazing. It told the story, and I liked the idea of two capable kids, and even the dog who wasn't too like it wasn't like Scooby-Doo, which is Hanna-Barbera dogs and animals are usually very humanish. I can't remember the word I'm looking for. Anthropomorphic, I think that's what it is.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, but at least he did have some. He did seem to be Bandit seemed to be fairly smarter than most dogs.
Yeah, Bandit was smart, but he was really kind of annoying because he had a really annoying bark.
Yeah.
Music was by Hoyt Curtin, by the way. It's really good jazz music, and
yeah.
But of course, we lean heavily on Blip, the little monkey who belongs to Space Ghost's friends, because Blip's so incredibly useful. There's a little bit of in joke. I remember years ago, I knew Doug Wildey, and he told me, he told me this, and then I read an interview later in the comic book where he actually said the same thing. He was like, he never wanted to put Bandit in the cartoon. It was just that originally what they were kind of, the whole concept started, they were originally going to do this thing based on a radio show called Jack Armstrong, the All-American Boy. And that kid had a dog. And Joe Barbera wanted to put a dog in there. He's like, kids love dogs, or whatever. And, and Doug didn't want to do it because he thought that, then it's this little animal you have to keep up with in the story all the time. And of course, it's still plaguing the rest of us today because I'm sitting there going, God, I keep forgetting to put Bandit in the scene, and then I have to go back and rewrite stuff to make sure Bandit shows up. And and also he has to be carried around because he's kind of a little dog, and it's kind of a pain in the butt. And I remember Doug saying, it's like, I wanted to put a monkey in there. A monkey can go get keys. And clearly Alex Toth learned that lesson, took that lesson away from it, because then when he was in charge of making Space Ghost, bam, Blip is a monkey.
He can climb, he can walk, you don't have to carry him, he can steal stuff.
Yeah. Why deep in some other solar system is there a monkey? Who knows? Exactly. Why does the monkey wear a mask? Why does the monkey wear a mask? So you won't think he's like some other monkey.
Right. Is that really a bear? What is that?
Yeah, well, the funny thing is they all stick to those masks like Bandits. Every team has somebody with a mask on.
Oh, yeah, Bandits have a mask.
Frankenstein Jr., this giant building-sized robot, has a mask.
Yeah.
Mytor has a mask. It's like just everybody's got the same mask. They love that design.
I'm surprised that Dr. Quest didn't, develop some kind of like flying harness for Bandit so they wouldn't have to keep carrying him around.
Can I write that?
Write it in. Make it almost look like not Robbie the robot, but the little robot from like the old when they put him in the Fantastic Four, that robot, like those little Herbie, like the little side jet things, with little light, little beep 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 beep, so that he can fly around. And then if they need to, they can control him. Yeah, write that in.
Yeah, he's just flying around peeing on things.
That's right. The funny thing, why I was just mentioning that I'm a huge, Hercules was my favorite when I was a kid, but I'm a huge Quest fan. I collect Mondo posters, like from mondotees.com.
Oh, yeah.
And I was able to score, I can't remember when it came out, this huge Jonny Quest poster they put out. And I've got it right above my desk, so I keep looking up at it. And that's why I was like, oh, yeah, Bandit does have a mask. I can see him. I'm actually going to put a picture of the print on the episode show notes because it's one of my favorite posters.
Oh yeah, no, I just looked it up too. It's like that is really cool.
Isn't that fun?
Yeah, who did that? poster?
I honestly cannot remember. I got it a while back because to me, it like really. Here we are talking about. Well, if you want to see what we're talking about,
we're talking about a visual. This is good.
Yeah.
This is good podcast.
This is good TV. This is a good podcast.
Yeah, but then they're running along in front of the logo at the bottom, and
yeah,
and it all looks like they're using still like Doug Wildey art.
Yeah. It's really fun. I'll put a picture of it in the show notes so people can see it. But you can almost hear the
music. This is by Matthew Wood.
Yeah, I can't read his signature from here on the poster. But yeah, it's a fun poster. But it doesn't have any of the bad guys in it. It's just, of course, really, and that's like who's on the show this week. I'm talking about is Zinn, is Benton's arch nemesis, and
yes.
So you decided that you were going to use him, and why did you decide you wanted to put him into Future Quest?
I think he's the only Quest villain anybody can name.
Yeah.
Generally, there were these other warlords and stuff who turned up, but really, what everybody remembers is Zinn, and what they always remember is Zinn's cool spider robot that could shoot death rays out of its eye. And even though it had these very skinny legs and everything, a tank could shoot at it, and it would just sort of push it back a little.
Yeah.
It's like. That was so cool. I mean, it conveyed so much power having the skinny thing that could just walk through everything. And so I was like, okay, we got to get those spider bots back in here.
Oh yeah, the single eye always creeped me out. I don't know why and it could spin around and the eye would be anywhere, and
yeah,
they always they were creepy.
And they really riffed on it in the Impossibles. That right. Omnidroid that Mr. Possible has fight is. It's like that's straight out of the thing, pretty much. So that was it was interesting because then I went to examine Dr. Zinn. Like, all right, it's like as I remember, they make a real Yellow Peril character out of him.
Yeah,
and it was like, so that's unfortunate. So let's see what we can do there to get more use out of him without doing that. And then I'm looking back at Doug Wildey's designs, and I'm like, oh, wait, it's like, Dr. Zinn actually doesn't look, he looks Asian, but that's about it. He's not wearing any wacky getup or anything. And then you start to realize, and then you watch the cartoon, you realize, they actually were playing him pretty straight. It's the voice actor who's then going, Dr. Quest, and doing all that stuff. Yeah. And it's like, he actually could have, if he had just been voiced, with somebody with like a bass voice doing that, not doing a big caricature or whatever, it would have been way more modern, because really a lot about the show is very modern and still holds up today.
Oh, definitely. And it is that. It's the art and the coloring on it is fine. It's the over-the-top cackling and stereotypical accent that make the character, the whole Yellow Peril thing.
Yeah, I would love to do a little experiment where we let's re-record this scene with someone different doing Zinn's voice and see how it plays. I think you could really change the entire tone of it. But anyway, so I'm kind of going forth with Zinn like this, just simply sounding different, but looking about the same.
Yeah.
And I always had this kind of little backstory in my head. I like the idea that maybe Zinn and Quest weren't always enemies, and maybe Zinn was actually a mentor to him. So you get that a little bit. You've probably read that one issue. There's a little flashback it's a Frankenstein Jr. story.
Yep.
And you find out that the Frankenstein Jr. Scientist and Dr. Quest and Dr. Zinn and Dr. Quest's wife and Dr. Zinn were all working on this same thing together. So I'm trying to I don't want to go too much into that because I want to save some of that for a possible straight Jonny Quest story.
Sure.
But I do want to indicate, and then also when Dr. Quest meets Zinn, me or anything like that, he yells at him and goes, "Archie, what have you done?"
Yeah.
It's kind of like just this, more like a business rival rather than deadly enemies.
Yeah, and people that usually dislike each other that much or get on each other's nerves that much, we're usually friends at one point. Usually know enough about each other to be able to do that.
Yeah, you gotta have. There's got to be some affection for anybody to be that or whatever.
You got to love to hate. You can't, or you'd be indifferent about the person.
And we're still not making Zen out like he's a great guy, but he's helping, and he starts to turn into like, oh yeah, when your planet's being attacked, you can't really turn down anybody who's good at doing anything. It's all hands on deck.
Yeah,
and they're just putting their differences aside and they're working together, and that to me is way more interesting than Dr. Zen just being this evil force all the way through. It makes it more dimensional.
Well, exactly. That is the other fun thing about this is that we're getting. It's like when you see a movie and you're like, oh, that was pretty good, and then you read the book and you're getting more of the sort of backstory and the more that this text in there, subtext. In reading these, it's fun to be getting more, feeling more about the character. To not learning more, we are learning more, but it's fun to hear them talk in more than just the script of the comics or the over the top melodrama of the time. That's one of the things I'm also really enjoying about Future Quest.
Yeah, and like Jezebel Jade, who's another big character in the Quest team. She's supposed to be a kind of soldier of fortune who's not always necessarily on your side. But on the show, I don't think you saw very much of her actually being against them.
Right.
And I thought, well, let's just have her straight up against them at the beginning. In fact, I think Darwin wanted that too, where it's just, she comes in and she's sort of a heavy for a while. And the same thing, she ultimately would prefer the planet stay intact.
Yeah, she lives there.
Yeah, it's her place. She's not got anywhere else to go, really. So,
right.
So she throws in and starts helping them instead of like the first time, you really get her out in the action. She immediately bashes Race in the head and knocks him out.
Yeah, I love Race. He always was like a Steve McQueen kind of character to me.
Oh yeah,
the white hair. Like,
definitely. He's got to be this old school guy, old school hero. That was just like one of the first big moments for him. In the story, what you see him do is bring down a dinosaur with one rifle shot.
Right.
Like, that's the most Race Bannon scene imaginable, I thought.
Yeah. Yeah, he's great. I was always like, wow, he's got white hair. When I was a kid, I remember just being like, how old is he? But man, he seems like he can do a lot of stuff.
Yeah, he just has white hair.
Yeah.
It's a great cartoon tag because it makes him stick out. And then later you realize, oh yeah, he's running around with women and playing with the kids and being strong or whatever. It's just white hair. It's just not,
it was
start to realize.
Just a choice.
Yes, some people have white hair.
That's funny. Well, hey, Jeff, I want to thank you for taking the time and talking with me tonight about this. I really appreciate it.
Oh yeah, this was fun.
Yeah, and just so everybody knows, I know some of the things, but what else are you working on? What else you want to plug that you're doing?
At the moment, what I have coming out pretty soon, I think it's this month actually. Mark Andreyko and I have been writing a mini series with Batman 66 meeting Wonder Woman 77. So it's the Adam West Batman with Linda Carter Wonder Woman, which is something fans have been asking for a long time. And Mark just came up to me at a show and said, we've got to just do this. And I was like, yeah, I don't know why we haven't done it yet. And so we put together a thing, and artists David Hahn and Carl Kiesel, who are both amazing and together are more than anyone can bear, are doing the art. It's just incredible the way it's turning out. Roberta Flores, who's also a good illustrator in his own right and an excellent colorist, is coloring it. He's Mad Pencil Studio, I think, is how he's listed in the book, though, which I always tell people to use their own name. I don't like the studio thing. Right. It's like makes you too replaceable. But anyway, it's Roberto and his friends coloring it, and it's turning out to be a beautiful book, and it spans 3 time periods, which is a lot of fun to do. Oh, that'll be great! So, I can't wait. Yeah, it's already started coming out on digital, but now you'll be able to just get the first comic book this month, I think. Oh, great. I'll have to go to my local and check it out. Or I actually order my books. It makes it a little easier to just order them and have them show up at my house. You don't like driving all over New York?
Well, that's it. I don't feel like driving. The nearest shop is an hour away. So, and if it's snowing out, like it's supposed to be very, very cold all week, and it's already starting to snow right now, actually. So, but what are you going to do? What are you going to do?
I know.
We can all live down in the North Carolina where it's nice and warm. That's not where you live, but that's where I used to live.
No, but for some reason, every time I visit that state, it's always happens to be in the middle of summer. I'm like, why? Why would I keep coming back right at summertime in the hottest place in the United States?
Oh, I remember
it's not the hottest place,
right? But when you're from
Louisiana,
when you're from a fairly temperate climate. When I first moved there, I remember hopping out of the U-Haul, and I thought I was going to melt into the pavement. It was so hot. Well, we're definitely going to look for that crossover, the Batman 66 Wonder Woman. I can't wait. I've been looking at that. And I've got to stack a few issues I haven't read of Future Quest. So I'm going to actually read those tonight before I edit this up. And again, Jeff, I want to thank you a lot for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me on. That's cool.
All right, man. Have a good night.
You too.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview that I had with Jeff. It was a lot of fun. I'm hoping to maybe get some more interviews on the show. If you'd like to see, or no, you're not going to see them. So if you'd like to hear more interviews, maybe leave some comments in the show notes or over on the Facebook page. And as usual, I want to thank you for listening to the program. Again, it was a lot of fun tonight. Our theme music is by Broke for Free, and you can find links to other music from the show on the website, heroesvillainsandsidekicks.com. And again, if you have a chance, head over to iTunes. I'm seeing we're starting to get a few reviews in there, so let's see how many more we can get over there. And if you like the interview, maybe mention it over there too on iTunes. You can find us also, of course, on the website, or you can find us at Google Play or Stitcher. We're all over the place, but I know most people, they end up heading over to iTunes. So next week, I'm not sure who we're going to do. If you have any ideas, head over to the website and maybe leave a comment or go to the homepage where you can sort of just send me a quick email from the form that's on the middle of the page. If not, I think we're due for a sidekick. So if you have any ideas for sidekicks, again, send me an email from the homepage or on the Facebook page or tweet it out, whatever, and that's the one I'll do. So the first one I get, that's the one I do. If I don't get one, I'm going to have to think of one myself. All right, again, thanks a lot, and we'll be back next week with more. Take care.